The next text from the Edexcel English Language and Literature Voices Anthology for A-Level is De Profundis by Oscar Wilde. That's text 2.1, page 11 in the anthology as it stands. And again, we've got quite a short extract here, and it's from De Profundis, which means from the depths, and written by Oscar Wilde during his imprisonment in Reading Jail and first published in 1905. So you may have done a little bit of the background and the context of Oscar Wilde, and in effect he'd gone to prison for being homosexual, but it wasn't necessarily exactly what they sent him to prison for. He kind of did go to prison for that, but it's through the perjury really is how they use that as to create the custodial sentence. But in effect, yeah, really it's connected to his sexuality is where it's kind of linked to as well. I find this text quite interesting in many ways as well, because I think you can see it in a particular way, but I think what's the main thing in terms of the voice that comes through it for me is I see a lot of it's kind of unapologetic and quite defiant, I think, at times as well, whereas it could be viewed as being in the way where you could almost see it as if he's regrets in some ways. It could be seen like that, but I think really I'd go down the route of it's about being unapologetic, in there's an element of defiance and self-realisation. I think is really the main thrust of this really. So we'll go on to the actual piece itself, and it's a one-pager, and if we get set up with this again, remember it's an extract, and with all that means it's from a much larger work, but I believe this was published after his death, if I remember rightly. So we've got, I want to get to the point where I shall be able to say quite simply and without affectation that the two great turning points in my life were when my father sent me to Oxford and when society sent me to prison. So there's a parallel phrasing there. My father sent me to Oxford, society sent me to prison. And it's technically personified really as well, isn't it, when you think about it? I will not say that prison is the best thing that could have happened to me. So there's some understatement here. So litotes, I won't say that prison is the best thing that could have happened to me. For that phrase would savour of too great bitterness towards myself. Now this goes with what I was saying earlier on about self-realisation and defiance as well later on. I would sooner say, or hear it said of me, that I was so typical a child of my age that in my perversity, and for that perversity's sake, I turned the good things of my life to evil, and the evil things of my life to good. First things first, that last bit is an example of anti-metaboly, which is what I always call the Bruce Forsyth term of nice to see you, nice. And it's when you're flipping the words around like that. You might sometimes encounter it referred to as chiasmus, which is sometimes technically correct but more precise when the words are swapped round. It's anti-metaboly, but you might sometimes know it or be taught it as chiasmus because the two terms of anti-metaboly and chiasmus they appear to be blurring together as terms. So nothing to worry about, it's just the way language develops over time. Then we've got, this is really like an exophoric reference here. I would sooner say, or hear it said of me, that I was so typical a child of my age. This really links to the concept of the fin de siècle of the late 19th century, when there was a kind of resurgence in a kind of very bold artistic movement, and it's kind of associated with decadent culture is the idea of people living extravagantly and indulging yourselves. So in terms of that, there's a kind of vague exophoric reference to that kind of lifestyle, and then with the pragmatics of the actual statement there, the implication would being that his sexuality is what he's thinking of there, is that I seem to be like a typical child of my age and I was living to these excesses. It seems to be the kind of thing that he's saying there. So this is the kind of the part of it where he seems to be showing some kind of regret in some way. You could infer it as that, but look closely and I think it does actually turn a corner on that as well. Perversity is an interesting word because of the connotations of that. Perversity, the idea that there's something wrong, and then of course this is written, first published in 1905, and it's from the perspective of that society, and perversity and perversion, they're quite emotionally loaded words, aren't they, really? But that's more like how he would have been labelled by other people, would be more accurate. What is said, however, by myself or by others matters little. So you've got a bit of hyperbaton there, where doesn't. How would we say? What is matters little, or doesn't matter much? We might use it like that. It could be. It's sort of a bit more poetic. It's a bit more dramatic like that, isn't it? It heightens the language. The important thing, the thing that lies before me. This would work as anadiplosis as well. I know we've got the there as well, but the important thing, the thing that lies before me, and then we've got anaphora here as well, the emphasis. This makes it quite, it has a kind of spoken effect to it as well. The thing that I have to do, the brief remainder of my days is not to be maimed, marred and incomplete. Notice there is a syndetic list and a lexical set here, all to do with disfigurement in some way. It's all kind of linked to that, isn't it? And it works as like a decremental list in some way, maimed, marred and incomplete. It doesn't seem quite as emotionally loaded as those other two, particularly that one. Is to absorb into my nature, that's metaphorical, absorb into my nature all that has been done to me, to make it part of me, to accept it without complaint, fear or reluctance. The supreme vice is shallowness. Whatever is realised is right. So this is what I mean about this kind of declarative here, this determination, this defiance, this confidence that is coming through from his experiences as well. Then the supreme vice, again the implication of what's really bad is to be shallow about it, is to not treat it with the seriousness that it deserves. So vice has connotations of crime as well, actually, but he obviously, to a modern perspective, he's not committed a crime, but in the society that he was in, he was treated as such. Then, well, he committed perjury is a crime, but anyway, we said about that at the start. In reality, it was really connected to the sexuality. When first I was put into prison, some people advised me to try and forget who I was. So that's hyperbaton. When first I was put into prison. So when I was first put into prison, when you're reading that out loud, your brain almost tries to put you into the more standard order. But with hyperbaton, where you're inverting the typical word order, you're heightening the language, you make it seem more dramatic, more profound, which is really linked to the title, like De Profundis, like from the depths. It's much more deep and meaningful. It was ruinous advice. It is only by realising what I am that I have found comfort of any kind. So you could read into this in terms of the pragmatics. He's not, and because of the time it's written in, he's not necessarily going to specify a name precisely and label his sexuality in that way. It's through pragmatics here, really, as well. Presumably because he'd be writing it to an audience who he think would be interested and maybe possibly more likely to be supportive, I would assume, as well. Now am I advised by others to try it on my release to forget that I've ever been in prison at all. I know that would be equally fatal, and that's hyperbolic. It would mean that I would always be haunted by an intolerable sense of disgrace. There's a metaphor there as well, and that those things that are meant for me as much as for anybody else. This is you see the defiance coming through here. Intolerable sense of disgrace, and that these things are meant for me as much as for anybody else. Parenthesis here: the beauty of the sun and moon, the pageant of the seasons, the music of daybreak, this is all parallel phrasing, the silence of great nights, the rain falling through leaves, or the dew creeping over the grass and making it silver. And that's a syndetic list as well, because we've got a conjunction here at the end, linking all that together. Would all be tainted for me, I'm just going to move this up, would all be tainted for me and lose their healing power and their power of communicating joy. So that would be personification as well, communicating joy. To regret one's own experiences, to arrest one's own development. To deny one's own experiences, to put a lie into the lips of one's own life. So he uses parallel phrasing here at the end as well. To regret one's own experiences, to deny one's... He's using this basically the same structure repeated. To deny one's own experiences, to put a lie into the lips of one's own life. So this is where this bold kind of declarative statement is defiant. To deny one's own experiences is to put a lie. You've got a metaphor, put a lie into the lips of one's own life. It's all metaphorical as well. It is no less than a denial of the soul. So that's be technically metaphorical as well, working like that. So it's quite an interesting piece. I have just noticed something that I'd missed up here as well. So all that has been done to me to make it part of me, there you go, that's epistrophe there, where you've got the bit repeated at the end. So it shows, there's a lot of techniques used here in a very short space of time. It's obviously, he's had time, he's written it in prison, so he's had a lot of time to write it and think about the words and think about his life and reflect on things. But I take from this that it's defiant, it's confident at the end, and saying, I'm not going to listen to these advice of other people. I want to enjoy life and not forget the things I've done and accept that it's part of me. That's how I see it anyway. So hopefully you found that useful. It was only a short one, that one. But thanks for listening, and then there's all the others to listen to as well. Hope you find them useful, and thank you very much.